Hello, hello. I hope everyone can hear me okay. I've been having some phone issues today. But other than that, all is well. And I hope all is well on your end. Let me get my stuff together here. We are. Let me get my stuff up. Okay. All right. So, communicating our needs. I am excited to talk about this today because I think this is something that a lot of people struggle with, especially, well, I think it depends on, it's so many different situations that people may struggle with communicating their needs, whether it be the workplace or be with friends, be with family, romantic relationships. So I'm just going to talk about it in a very general way because I feel like it applies to all relationships regardless of like who you're working who you're encountering. So I have 7 affirmations for tonight. I'm going to talk through each one as usual. And I hope that these are helpful. Feel free to use the affirmations however you wish to. If you want to use them just by journaling and putting them in your journal. If you want to put up sticky notes, if you're a sticky note person and like them, write them down there. Feel free to do so. If you need to change the language at all, make sure to do so. You're perfectly okay of doing that. And then if there is any of these affirmations that you're like want to expound on, feel free to do that too. You can always make more affirmations with the one. So that's great also. Or if you need to just add more affirmations that hit home for you, because I think that a lot of people have their reasons as far as like why communicating their needs is difficult. So just based off of whatever those reasons are, definitely feel free to add more or adjust the language of any of these. I mean, ultimately, when it comes to communicating our needs, is usually the reason why we don't do it is usually just avoidance. Avoidance of the fact that we're just uncomfortable with the conversation, that we don't want to create any tension or cause any issues. A lot of times our avoidance is just trying to keep the peace when essentially there is no peace really, because there's no peace internally, because you have a need that's not met and you're not able to put that out there or articulate it or even just say, what your needs are. And then also too, like sometimes we just don't want to come off a certain way or be judged or have a connotation of being a certain way. Like for me, I'm always told that I'm dramatic, right? Oh, you're just being dramatic. It's not that bad. So in being told that over time, you then begin to tell yourself that, like, oh, I have a need, but well, maybe I'm just being dramatic. It's not that big of a deal. So then we take that trauma and those triggers and then we put them back on ourselves. And that's why we decide not to communicate those needs. So that's just an example of what it looks like. Feel free to drop in the comments, like if you're having any difficulties with communicating your needs to others, regardless of who it is, drop in the comments. Let me know like what areas, what you're struggling with the most. And if none of these affirmations hit to any of those areas, we can come up with something on the spot. That's perfectly okay if you want to have an affirmation to take away tonight. So definitely talk back to me. Feel free to ask questions. If you need me to repeat anything, definitely ask me to repeat. I'll be more than happy to do so. And if you, like I said, if there's any of these that don't speak to what you need, communicate your needs. See see how I got that in there? And say, hey, none of these are really speaking to my reasoning for not being able to communicate them, and we can come up with something. So I'll start with number one. Oh, okay. My bad. There was a call that came in. Okay. Number one, I understand my needs holistically and communicate them clearly. I understand my needs holistically and communicate them clearly. So the biggest thing when it comes to communicating our needs is understanding what those needs are. And sometimes, I know one question that I would get like in my one-on-ones with my manager would be, okay, is there anything that you need? And I'm like, no, or I don't know. I'm not quite, it's like kind of hard to answer. You quite don't know how to answer it. And usually it's because you can't really think of like what your needs are. So the first step is understanding your needs holistically, meaning understanding the full scope of what your needs are versus these little pockets. Because a lot of times if we take those little small details and say that this is a need, it may not be received well on the other side, whether it be there's tension there, or it could just be it creates more confusion, or it doesn't land well because it's a small detail versus like being able to articulate all of the pieces. So understanding your needs holistically, so that way you can communicate them clearly, is the first thing and what's truly important. And a lot of times, a lot of times we have a hard time just communicating them, or them even just landing to the other person, because things aren't clear. We don't have the full picture. There's minimal information. We're operating off of emotions versus operating off of like all of the details and all of the pieces and getting the whole scope. So once you're able to do that, that's what's most important when articulating that need. Also, sometimes we just don't have the language. Like, we know what we need, but we just don't know how to say it. So taking the time to really think about like how you want to articulate it to the other person, the words that you want to say, what medium you want to use. Like, so if you feel like it's better if you articulate your needs written, where it's like bullet points and is really kind of thoroughly expressed and explained, versus trying to speak what those needs are, because sometimes you may forget something, or you may slip up on words, and then that kind of makes you forget other things, or there's so many different reasons. So like really thinking through like the language that you want to use and the how, and actually, really not necessarily planning it, but kind of essentially like thinking through it and planning it before doing so, and moving with discretion and moving with intention is really important when it comes to articulating your needs. Sometimes we're articulating our needs to the wrong person. Sometimes we're not saying it with all of the information that's needed, or we withhold information because we're speaking to the wrong person, or that person just don't have the answers, or they can't give you what you need. So there's so many things that kind of goes into that. So having a holistic approach and understanding everything holistically is what makes it most important when it comes to communicating clearly. So that was number one. I understand my needs holistically and communicate them clearly. Number two, I am confident in expressing my needs while being patient and attentive listener. I am confident in expressing my needs while being a patient and attentive listener. So a lot of times when we talk about us expressing our needs, we always think that we're doing all of the talking. Even in communicating our needs and expressing our needs, there still is a sense of patience and attentive listening. And a lot of times we express needs without hearing the other person. And because of that, us requesting our needs is not landing, and it's not going to be receptive because of the fact that we're not listening. So you have to be present in the conversation. You have to be present in the conversation that you're having with the person, even when it's you articulating the needs that you're looking to be met. So don't forget that when it comes to that. Um, Hello, how are you? Thank you. So when it comes to number two, making sure that you are listening as well as expressing and communicating and understanding that that's just as important. Okay, awesome. And then the other thing I put down is just making sure to listen to understand rather than listening to reprove. So making sure that when you are listening in the conversation, that you're actually taking the time to understand what they are. Oh, I'm sorry, this kind of went out. Understand what they are trying to articulate in that conversation, because at the end of the day, um, if we're just talking, and there is no listening, there is no understanding, there is no sense of solution, which we'll talk about that in a second, then there's no need in even having the conversation. So that's number two. Um, Number three. Uh, yes. So number three, I make space for others to communicate their needs with love and compassion. I make space for others to communicate their needs with love and compassion. So we have to understand that if we give people space to communicate their needs to us, then we will have space to communicate our needs to others. So it's definitely important to make sure that we give people space just as much as we're looking or wanting the space. Okay. Um, Now, when it comes to the communicating the needs of, or allowing other people to communicate their needs, it's kind of like a give or take. Um, why is that? That's not a part of the conversation. But thanks for asking, I guess. It's not, I mean, I'm not in Israel, nor am I in um, Palestine, so I'm not quite sure why that question came. Um, awesome. So now I'm lost my place. That was number three. I make space for others to communicate their needs with love and compassion. Number four, I embrace optimism and prioritize solutions over being right in difficult conversations. I embrace optimism and prioritize solutions over being right in difficult conversations. So just understanding that um, embracing optimism and prioritizing solutions over being right. And I know that that's hard to hear, but a lot of times we find ourselves in conversations where we're spiraling, right? We're having conversations with people and no one's looking to actually understand each other. It's more so of everyone looking to be right in a particular situation. So in those situations, we have to take into consideration what the priority is. Is the priority in being is that being right, or is the priority in just finding a solution? Now, granted, the solution may be, okay, maybe we're not going to be friends like we used to be, or maybe we're no longer together, or maybe we're family members, but maybe we're only working with each other or around each other during these times or during these family gatherings, or maybe we're not coming over to each other's house as much. The solution may not be ideal, but a solution is better than walking away from a situation with no resolve, with no end result. And then when you see the person the next time, you're going back over and spiraling all over again. So just kind of understanding that there are situations where you have to prioritize finding a solution versus hitting home and being right and beating a dead horse. Because what that does is it creates burnout on both sides. It creates a situation where it can escalate and make things worse. It also can create a situation where, um, where things just kind of are unresolved, and then now you have this unresolved cloud hanging over your head um to the point where it just kind of stays and it lingers, and it creates bitterness and frustration, and it ends up just kind of being more of a frustration and a hassle for you versus it being resolved. And like I said, even if that resolve isn't ideal, at least it's resolved and it's not just like a lingering thing that just kind of just melting over your head every day. So I embrace optimism and prioritize solutions over being right in difficult situations. Number 5, my needs are valid and I have the right to communicate them openly. My needs are valid and I have the right to communicate them openly. So understanding that if you have a valid need, it's okay to communicate it, and it's okay to be open about it. It's okay to to articulate it, of course, with compassion and with discretion and all of those things, right? But communicating them openly, there's nothing wrong with that, and it's okay to tell yourself that that's okay. Sometimes we don't communicate those needs because we are filled with guilt. We're filled with shame, with just fear in general of what's going to happen, whether it be with judgments, whether it be with just the perception of the people that are around us and how people perceive us. So just understanding that your needs are valid and it's okay to communicate them openly, and you shouldn't I don't like saying shouldn't, but because shouldn't can kind of be shameful, but don't be afraid of openly communicating what you need to the people that are around you. And once you get that, then you just have to master how you do that, just making sure that you're handling it in the right way. Because a lot of times people don't receive what we need because of our tone or the words that we use or the timing. Sometimes it's just the timing isn't right. If someone says that they're not ready to talk or they're not ready to have a conversation, then, sometimes we have to respect that. And a lot of times we try to push past that and go to communicate our needs and then get frustrated, mad, upset, and angry because of the fact that it's not being received. So a lot of times it's not even the needs that we're articulating, but it's the tone, it's how we're doing it, how we're saying it, and the timing. So keep all of that in consideration when communicating, and that will take you so much further than being feelings based or emotions based and just articulating our needs when we're ready to blow up or having displaced anger because of the fact that we didn't communicate our needs sooner. So that was, my needs are valid and I have the right to communicate them openly. Number 6, I accept that communicating my needs is not selfish and strengthens my relationships. I accept that communicating my needs is not selfish and strengthens my relationships. So it just kind of goes back to 5, understanding that it's not selfish, but also taking that a step further in the fact that it also will strengthen the relationships that are around us. It will either show us, the people that are in our lives that are not the best fit for our lives, or it will strengthen the relationships that we already have and that we're already building. And by doing that, and I say that by doing that sooner than later, because a lot of times we have these tough relationships that we're trying to cultivate, and because we're unable to articulate our needs, there is a tension, right? There's a growing tension, and then we eventually articulate our needs, and then we have that conversation, and then now all of a sudden everything is good. And that could have been rectified a long time ago. You know what I mean? It could have been fixed a long time ago, but because we are going into these relationships with triggers and avoidance and frustrations and our own traumas, it just kind of creates a space where we're going to try to avoid those conversations. But the earlier and the sooner that you have those conversations, especially like in a romantic relationship, so if you're trying to build a relationship, a close relationship like that, communicating your needs up front, communicating your needs sooner, creates peace, right? Because the more that you communicate your needs and the better that you get at it, it will start to remove people out of your life that shouldn't be there and make space for the people that are in your life that should be there. And that in itself will create the peace that you need when it comes to relationships. Not to say that there's not going to be any turmoil or there's not going to be any disagreements or arguments or frustrations. Not saying that at all, but just saying that at least at that point, the people that are supposed to be in your life are in your life, and the people that are not supposed to be there are not. And that's ultimately what you want. Because if someone is, overstaying their welcome when it comes to our lives, or if they leave out of our lives prematurely, then it creates issues in other parts of our lives. You know what I mean? So, and then we may miss the blessing. God blesses us through people, through our relationships and through the relationships that we've built. And if we are not really taking the time to cultivate those relationships and have the tough conversations and dive into those conversations willingly, rather than waiting to the last minute or avoiding or procrastinating on those conversations, the more that we dive in and lean into those things, the better off that we will be when it comes to our relationships. So that was I accept that communicating my needs is not selfish and strengthens my relationships. Number 7, this is the last one. Communicating my needs honors my self-worth and personal growth. Communicating my needs honors my self-worth and personal growth. So understanding, and this is kind of going back to number 6, they're kind of all linked together, but this goes back to number 6. If you are communicating your needs, you're honoring your personal growth. You're honoring and cultivating your personal growth to be a better individual, not just for yourself, but for the people around you. And it also honors your self-worth. If you're communicating your needs and you're being firm about those needs and you're having those conversations with confidence, with acceptance, without any judgments, and just kind of just going and diving into it, your sense of self-worth will grow. Because a lot of times communicating our needs is a self-doubt issue, right? We're doubting ourselves, we're doubting what our needs are, we're doubting our abilities, we're doubting just everything within us. And the more that you communicate your needs, the more that you're validated in those needs, the more that you have people around you that are also ensuring that your needs are met, and vice versa, right? Because it's a two-way street. Let's be real. Like these relationships have to be, to some extent mutual. And a lot of times relationships are not necessarily going to be 50-50. Sometimes it's going to be 60-70 and 40, 30. But at least it's a mutual give and take. Whereas there's a lot of times where we find ourselves in relationships where people are just taking. They're just taking. They're a liability. They're just on your back and you're just carrying them. And that's what the relationship is. But the more that you communicate your needs, the more that you advocate for yourself, the more that you stand up for yourself, the more that you have for these difficult conversations. And again, we're talking about having these conversations in a very healthy way. I'm not talking about you going off on people. And Debbie said, I need to tell you my needs, and this is what my needs are. I'm not talking about that. So don't do that. I'm talking about communicating in a healthy way what your needs are, without emotion, with logic, lucid thoughts, and articulating them in a way that is beneficial for whatever relationship that is. So again, it could be the tone, it could be the medium, like if you feel like it needs to be written versus, a conversation over the phone. Sometimes conversations, are great, but then other times, depending on who you're working with, especially in like work environments, you want a paper trail. Okay. So go ahead and, send that email per our conversation. This is what bullet point, bullet point, bullet point. This is what we talked about. So it just kind of depends, but making sure that you are finding the best ways for you that's comfortable for you to communicate those needs. And the more that you do that, the more it will build your self-worth within yourself, because your self-worth doesn't change. It's just we have to believe what the self-worth is. And then also building our own personal growth. So I hope that this was helpful. I'll go back through the tops just so that way everybody has what these affirmations are. So I'll start from number 1. We had 7. So number 1 is I understand my needs holistically and communicate them clearly. Number 2, I am confident in expressing my needs while being a patient and an attentive listener. Number 3, I make space for others to communicate their needs with love and compassion. Number 4, I embrace optimism and prioritize solutions over being right in difficult conversations. Number 5, my needs are valid and I have the right to communicate them openly. Number 6, I accept that communicating my needs is not selfish and strengthens my relationships. And number 7, communicating my needs honors my self-worth and personal growth. So awesome. I hope that this was helpful. I hope that this actually just kind of starts the conversation with yourself as far as like how you communicate your needs. If this is something that you feel like you need to work on more, or if you feel like this is something that you do well and that this was just a great reminder, by all means, I hope this was helpful. If there's any affirmations or any areas of communicating our needs that I missed that you feel like you would want to see more affirmations on, definitely let me know. I'll be posting the video. So definitely let me know in those comments, and I can always respond back to them with something. But other than that, you all have a great rest of your night. Yeah, you're welcome. You have a great rest of your night. And feel free to come back to this too. Like if you missed some of the affirmations, feel free to come back to this. I'll be saving this and then posting it in a couple of minutes here. So y'all have a great rest of your night. Bye.